The payoff matrix below shows the per unit profits associated with the production strategies of two utility companies, UA and UB. Each firm has two choices, to reduce production by 10% or by 20%. The first entry in each cell indicates the profits to UA, the second the profits to UB. And then it says, based on the information and assuming no cooperation, which of the following statements is true? So in this table, payoff matrix, we're given the choices for UA and UB. And as before, they are to reduce production by 20% or to reduce production by 10%. And this first cell, this number in this cell, indicates the profits of UA. Second is to UB. And now we're told to find which of the following statements is true. So to begin with, let's analyze this graph a bit and see what the incentives are and the dominant strategy, if there is any, each firm may have. So let's arbitrarily begin with this cell here, where they both reduce production by 20%. So in this case, they both earn a profit of $150. Now, let's see if UB has any incentive to reduce production by 10%. To analyze this, we'll see what the profit they make at reducing production by 10%, and that would be $250. And because 250 is greater than 150, they would have an incentive to reduce production by 10%. And if we were to assume that UA also reduces production by 10%, UB would make a profit of $50 if they kept production at 20%. But if they reduce production by 10%, they would make $100. So because 150 is less than 250, and 50 is less than 100, UB has a dominant strategy to reduce production by 10%. Now let's look at UA. So let's begin again at this cell here, where they both reduce production by 20%. So in this case, UA will earn a profit of $150. Now, to analyze whether they have any incentive to reduce production by 10%, let's look at the profit they earn at reducing their production by 10%. And that profit would be $250. And let's assume that UB also reduces production by 10%. In this case, UA, if they kept their production at 20%, they would have a profit of $150. But if we look at what happens if they reduce production by 10%, they would earn a profit of $100. So like UB, UA also has an incentive to reduce production by 10%, because they would rather have $250 over $150 and $100 over $50. So they both have a dominant strategy of reducing production by 10%. So let's look at the answer choices. A. Neither company has a dominant strategy. This is incorrect because both companies actually have a dominant strategy, and that would be to reduce production by 10%. So A is incorrect. B. Both companies have an incentive to reduce production by 10%. This seems to be the correct answer because looking at this table, we already analyzed it and found that in this situation, both UA and UB have an incentive to reduce production by 10%, because this is the point where they'll make the most profit. If regarding that there's no cooperation between the two companies, because if there was cooperation, they would both reduce production by 20%, because we can see that their profits are higher here than they are down here. So B seems to be the correct answer. C. Both companies have an incentive to reduce production by 20%. This is incorrect because this would only be true if they had cooperation between these two companies, and therefore they would work together and both reduce production by 20%. But in this case, there is no cooperation, so they don't know the actions of the other, and therefore they would reduce production by 10%. So C is incorrect. D. Only UA has an incentive to reduce production by 20%. This is incorrect because the UA doesn't have an incentive to reduce production by 20%. They have an incentive to reduce production by 10%. So D is incorrect. E. Only UB has an incentive to reduce production by 20%. This is incorrect because, as before, we highlighted how both companies have an incentive to reduce production by 10%, not 20%. So E is incorrect. And the correct answer is B.